Before I tell you this story, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever felt trapped by someone who was supposed to protect you, if you've ever wondered whether karma truly exists, or if you've ever doubted that justice can prevail after decades of abuse, hit that like button right now. Because what I'm about to share will prove that no matter how long it takes, the truth always finds its way to the light. And please, share this with someone who needs to hear that their suffering isn't permanent. Comment below if you've ever had to stand up to a family member who betrayed your trust. Your stories give others strength. My name is Devon, and for 21 years, I was slowly poisoned by the one person who should have protected me above all others. This is the story of how I discovered a $3.2 million inheritance that was kept hidden from me, and how I finally got my revenge on the respected psychiatrist everyone called a saint, my mother. The smell of antiseptic has been my childhood cologne. By the time I turned 6, I could identify different medications by their bitter taste alone. The chalky texture of crushed pills in my morning orange juice. The metallic tang of liquid supplements that made my throat close up. The drowsiness that followed breakfast like clockwork. My mother, Dr. Eleanor Marsh, was one of Philadelphia's most respected psychiatrists. She had a thriving practice in Rittenhouse Square, published papers in medical journals, and served on the board of 3 different charities focused on children's health. To the outside world, she was a saint, a single mother devotedly caring for her chronically ill child while maintaining a successful career. Devon needs their medication, she would tell anyone who'd listen, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. It's a rare autoimmune condition. Very few doctors understand it. That's why I have to manage everything myself. The irony wasn't lost on me, even as a child. Here was a mental health professional, someone trained to heal minds, systematically destroying her own child's body and spirit. But who would believe a sick child over a respected doctor? Our Victorian townhouse on Delancey Street was both a prison and a stage. 3 stories of mahogany panels and Persian rugs, where every room held memories of fabricated emergencies. The parlor where I'd collapsed during my 13th birthday party, thanks to the sedatives she'd slipped into my cake. The dining room where she'd induced seizures in front of dinner guests by switching my vitamins with something far more sinister. The library where she kept medical journals documenting conditions I supposedly had, each one more exotic than the last. I remember the first time I realized something was truly wrong. I was 8 years old, staying overnight at my friend Emma's house. For the first time in years, I woke up without a headache. My hands weren't shaking. I could eat breakfast without vomiting. I felt normal. Maybe you're getting better, Emma's mother had said cheerfully. But when I returned home, the symptoms returned within hours. My mother greeted me with her practiced look of concern and a new bottle of pills. You pushed yourself too hard, she said, stroking my hair as I lay in bed, dizzy and nauseous from whatever she'd given me. You know how fragile you are, sweetheart. That's why Mommy has to take such good care of you. The hospital of the University of Pennsylvania became my second home. The prestigious medical facility that combines advanced science with personalized care had seen me so often that the nurses knew me by name. But they saw what my mother wanted them to see, a devoted parent with a chronically ill child who needed constant medical attention. Dr. Eleanor Marsh was brilliant at her deception. She knew exactly how much to give me to create symptoms without causing permanent damage that could be traced. She rotated hospitals and doctors, never staying with one long enough for them to question inconsistencies. She documented everything meticulously, creating a paper trail of a mysterious illness that baffled even the best physicians. The medications changed over the years, but the pattern remained the same. Stimulants that made my heart race, followed by sedatives that left me unable to think clearly. Emetics that caused violent vomiting, paired with anti-nausea drugs that barely worked. Blood thinners that caused mysterious bruising, muscle relaxants that left me unable to walk properly. Poor Eleanor, her colleagues would say. Such a devoted mother. And poor Devon, such a brave child. By the time I reached high school, I'd missed more days than I'd attended. My education came in fragments, a few weeks here, a month there, before another flare-up would confine me to bed. My mother hired private tutors who came to the house, always when she was present, always under her watchful eye. Devon tires easily, she would tell them. 1 hour maximum, and I need to be here to monitor for symptoms. The isolation was perhaps worse than the physical symptoms. I had no real friends, no one who knew the real me beneath the layers of medication and manufactured illness. Social media became my window to a world I couldn't fully participate in. I watched classmates go to prom, graduate, go to college, start careers, fall in love, all while I remained frozen in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by pill bottles and medical equipment. But there was one person who saw through the facade, at least partially. My grandmother, Patricia Marsh, my father's mother. She lived in Society Hill, just a 15-minute walk from our house, but might as well have been on another planet for how often my mother allowed me to see her. "That child doesn't look sick to me," Grandma Patricia would say during her rare visits, her sharp blue eyes studying me over her reading glasses. "Mother, please," Eleanor would respond with practiced patience. "I know it's hard to accept, but Devon's condition is very real. I have the medical records to prove it." "Records can be fabricated," Grandma Patricia would mutter, but never loud enough for anyone else to hear. My grandmother passed away when I was 21. My mother told me about it 3 days after the funeral. "You were too ill to attend," she said, though I remembered that week clearly. I'd felt better than I had in months because she'd been distracted with the estate lawyers. What I didn't know then was that Grandma Patricia had left me everything. Not just her personal belongings, but a fortune that had been quietly accumulating for generations. A trust fund that my mother, as my guardian and protector, had complete control over. The years blurred together in a haze of medications and medical appointments. 25, 30, 35, milestones passed without significance. I lived in a suspended state, neither fully alive nor dead, just existing in the prison my mother had created. "You're so lucky to have me," she would say, preparing my evening medications with the precision of a chemist. "No one else would take care of you like this. No husband would stay. No employer would understand. It's just you and me, sweetheart. Forever." The manipulation was masterful. She'd isolated me so completely that I believed her. What job could I hold when I could barely get through a day without collapsing? What relationship could survive the burden of my illness? Who else would tolerate the constant medical emergencies, the cancelled plans, the dependency? My mother aged gracefully, her practice thriving, her reputation growing. She published a paper on caring for chronically ill adult children, a mother's journey that was praised in medical circles. She gave talks at conferences about the challenges of balancing a career with caregiving. She was nominated for humanitarian awards. Meanwhile, I aged rapidly. By 40, I looked 50. The constant medications had taken their toll. My hair was thin and brittle, my skin sallow, my body weak from years of forced inactivity. I spent my days in a medicated fog, reading when I could focus, watching the world pass by through my bedroom window. The turning point came slowly, almost imperceptibly. It started with the pandemic in 2020. When the world shut down, my mother's careful routines were disrupted. She couldn't take me to multiple doctors. She couldn't get certain medications. For the first time in decades, she had to reduce my pharmaceutical cocktail. And I started to feel different. Not better immediately, but clearer. The fog that had surrounded me for so long began to lift, just slightly. I could think in complete sentences. I could remember conversations from the day before. I started to question things I'd accepted for years. Why do I need this particular medication? I asked one evening as she prepared my pills. You know why, Devon. Your condition. What condition, exactly? What's the name of it? She paused, just for a second, but I caught it. It's a complex autoimmune disorder. I've explained this before. But what's it called? There must be a name. The medical terminology would only confuse you, she said, her tone sharper than usual. Take your medication. That night, for the first time in my adult life, I palmed the pills instead of swallowing them. When she left the room, I flushed them down the toilet. My heart was racing, not from medication, but from fear and excitement. The next morning, I woke up with a clear head. No nausea. No tremors. No crushing fatigue. I started palming more pills, flushing them away when she wasn't looking. Each day without the full dose of medications, I felt a little stronger, a little clearer. I began to research my supposed symptoms online, using the laptop she'd given me for entertainment but had never thought I'd use for investigation. What I found chilled me to the bone. Factitious disorder imposed on another, formerly called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. The symptoms matched perfectly. The devoted caregiver who needed the attention and sympathy. The medical professional who knew just enough to create convincing symptoms. The isolation of the victim. The financial control. Financial control. That phrase stuck with me. I'd never questioned why, at 50 years old, I had no access to money, no bank account, no credit cards. Everything went through my mother. She paid for everything, controlled everything. It's easier this way, she'd always said. You can't manage finances in your condition. But what if there was more to it? What if my grandmother had been right all along? I needed to be careful. If my mother suspected I was onto her, she could increase the medications, have me declared incompetent, or worse. I'd read about cases where victims of Munchausen by proxy who tried to escape were institutionalized by their abusers. So I played the part of the dutiful, sick child while secretly getting stronger. I timed my rebellions carefully, only skipping medications when I knew she'd be at her practice all day. I maintained my symptoms when she was around, forcing myself to appear weak and confused. But I was planning. Documenting. Waiting. The hardest part was the rage. 21 years of my life stolen. My 20s, 30s, 40s, gone. The career I might have had, the relationships I might have built, the children I might have raised, all sacrificed on the altar of her psychological needs. But rage, I learned, could be fuel if properly channeled. And I had plenty of fuel to burn. It happened on a Thursday in March 2025, just 2 months ago. My mother was at a medical conference in Boston, one of the few times she left me alone for more than a day, confident that I was too weak and dependent to cause any trouble. I'd been reducing my medication for 5 months by then, and while I still played the part of the invalid when she was around, alone I was growing stronger. Strong enough to search through her study while she was gone. Her study was her sanctuary, a place I was rarely allowed to enter. You need to rest, not worry about my work, she'd say, ushering me out whenever I ventured near. But with her 300 miles away, I had time. The room was meticulously organized, like everything else in my mother's life. Medical journals lined one wall, her degrees and awards covered another. Her mahogany desk dominated the center, its surface clean except for her laptop and a single framed photo of her holding me as a baby, both of us smiling. The irony of that image made my stomach turn. I started with the filing cabinets. Tax returns, medical records, mine, of course, volumes of them, insurance papers. Nothing unusual at first glance. But then, in the back of the bottom drawer, I found a folder marked simply PM Estate. Patricia Marsh. My grandmother. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside were legal documents, bank statements, and a letter in my grandmother's handwriting. The letter was addressed to me. My dearest Devon. If you're reading this, then you've finally found what your mother has hidden from you. I've watched for years as she's destroyed you, and my greatest regret is that I couldn't prove it in time to save you. I've left everything to you, not to her, to you. The trust fund, the investments, the properties. As of your 21st birthday, you became the sole beneficiary of approximately $3.2 million. Your mother was named as trustee only until you turned 25, at which point control should have passed to you. But I knew she would never tell you. I knew she would forge documents, lie, manipulate, whatever it took to maintain control. That's why I've also left copies of everything with my lawyer, Harold Whitman at Whitman and Associates in Center City. He has instructions to wait for you to contact him. I'm so sorry I couldn't do more while I was alive. Your mother is sick, Devon, but her sickness has made you the victim. Please, when you're strong enough, get help. Get free. All my love. Grandma Patricia. The room spun. $3.2 million. For 29 years, I'd been a millionaire and never known it. While my mother had been drugging me, controlling me, destroying me, she'd also been stealing from me. The bank statements confirmed it. Regular withdrawals from the trust account. Medical expenses for treatments I'd never received. Caregiving costs that went straight into her personal accounts. Specialized equipment that never existed. She'd been living off my inheritance while keeping me sick enough to never question it. I photographed everything with my phone, my hands shaking so badly I had to retake several shots. Then I carefully returned everything to its exact position. She couldn't know I'd been here. The next folder contained more horror. Medical records, not mine, but about me. Notes in my mother's handwriting detailing which medications to give me to produce specific symptoms. Careful calculations of dosages. A schedule of which hospitals to visit to avoid suspicion. One note, dated from my 16th birthday, read, Devon growing too aware. Increase sedatives. Consider adding antipsychotics, claim emerging mental health issues if questioned. Another, from when I was 25, legal transfer of trust approaching. Need documentation of incompetence. Induce temporary psychosis? Research methods. She'd been planning this for years. Every pill, every injection, every hospitalization had been calculated to keep me under her control. But the worst discovery was yet to come. In her desk drawer, locked but easy enough to pick with a hairpin and YouTube's help, I found her real financial records. Not just the theft from my trust fund, but her own accounts. My mother, the successful psychiatrist, was drowning in debt. Gambling debts, specifically. Nearly $500,000 owed to various creditors. She'd been using my inheritance to pay off her debts while maintaining the image of the successful doctor. The conference she was attending? I found the registration, paid for with funds from my trust. She'd stolen my health, my life, and my money. But worse than the theft was the calculation of it all. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. This was decades of deliberate abuse, carefully planned and meticulously executed. I sat in her chair, surrounded by evidence of her crimes, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years, clarity of purpose. I wasn't just going to escape. I wasn't just going to reclaim my money. I was going to destroy her, just as she'd destroyed me. But I had to be smart about it. If mismanagement is proven, the court can remove the guardian and appoint a new one. Beneficiaries can sue the guardian for breach of fiduciary duty. I needed legal help, medical help, and most importantly, I needed irrefutable proof. Over the next 2 days, while she was gone, I made copies of everything. I also did something else. I installed a hidden camera in my bedroom, disguised as a phone charger. If she was drugging me, I was going to catch her in the act. I contacted Harold Whitman through a secure email account I created at the library. His response was immediate. Ms. Marsh, I've been waiting 29 years for your message. Your grandmother was right to be concerned. I have all the original documents safe in my office. When can we meet? We arranged to meet the day my mother would be at her practice for a full day of appointments. I told him everything, the drugs, the theft, the abuse. He listened with growing horror and anger. This is criminal, he said. Fraud, theft, assault, false imprisonment. We're not just talking about a civil case here. Your mother could go to prison. Good, I said, and meant it. Harold helped me set up my own bank account, transferred a small amount from the trust to give me independence, and recommended a doctor who could help me safely wean off the cocktail of medications my mother had me on. Be careful, he warned. If she suspects anything, she might escalate. Document everything. Record if you can. And if you feel unsafe, leave immediately and call the police. I returned home before my mother got back from Boston, playing the part of the sick, dependent child she expected to find. She never suspected that her victim had finally grown teeth. How are you feeling, sweetheart? She asked, unpacking her suitcase. The same, I lied. Maybe a little worse. I think I need to increase the anxiety medication. She smiled, pleased. I'll adjust your dosage. You know I only want what's best for you. That night, as she prepared my pills with her back to me, the hidden camera captured her adding an extra capsule to the mix, something not in any of my prescription bottles. She ground it up and mixed it into my evening yogurt. Eat up, she said, watching me carefully. You need your strength. I ate half, claiming nausea, then excused myself to the bathroom where I forced myself to vomit it up. It was getting harder to maintain the charade, but I needed just a little more time. A little more evidence. The camera caught her the next night, and the next. Each time adding unmarked medications to my food or drinks. Each time, carefully watching to make sure I consumed it all. I saved samples when I could, storing them in hidden containers for testing. Dr. Sarah Chan, the physician Harold had recommended, ran blood tests during a secret appointment. You have traces of at least 6 different medications that shouldn't be mixed, she told me, horrified. Benzodiazepines, antipsychotics, muscle relaxants, this combination could have killed you. It's a miracle you're functional at all. It wasn't a miracle, I told her. It was calculated. She knew exactly how much to give to keep me sick but not dead. A dead daughter generates sympathy once. A sick daughter generates it forever. Dr. Chen documented everything, creating a medical record separate from the falsified ones my mother had created over the years. She also helped me understand what I was really dealing with. Factitious disorder imposed on another is a form of abuse, she explained. The perpetrator is not primarily motivated by financial gain, but many times by the attention, sympathy, and admiration they receive for being the parent of a sick child. But in my mother's case, it was both, the psychological satisfaction and the financial gain. A perfect storm of greed and mental illness, with me trapped in the eye of it. April 15, 2025. Tax Day. Also the day of my mother's annual charity gala for the Foundation for Childhood Wellness, an organization she'd helped found, allegedly to support families dealing with chronic childhood illness. The irony was so thick you could choke on it. The event was held at the Union League of Philadelphia, a gorgeous Gilded Age building on Broad Street. 500 of Philadelphia's elite would gather to celebrate my mother's humanitarian work. She would receive a Lifetime Achievement Award for her dedication to helping sick children and their families. I was never allowed to attend these events. Too stimulating for your condition, my mother would say. But this year, things would be different. For the past month, I'd been working with Harold and a team of lawyers he'd assembled. We'd gathered enough evidence to bury her, the hidden camera footage, the medical tests, the financial records, the forged documents. We'd also discovered something else. She'd been collecting disability payments in my name for 20 years, claims I'd never filed, money I'd never seen. The FBI was interested. Very interested. But I wanted more than legal justice. I wanted poetic justice. I wanted the woman who'd built her reputation on lies to have it destroyed by the truth, in front of everyone who'd ever admired her. Are you sure about this? Harold asked during our final planning meeting. We could just have her arrested quietly. You don't need to put yourself through a public confrontation. She put me through 21 years of hell while people applauded her for it, I said. They need to know who she really is. And she needs to see their faces when they find out. The plan was complex but elegant. I would arrive at the gala just as she was accepting her award. The FBI would be there, waiting. But before they arrested her, I would have my moment. I'd been preparing for weeks. Slowly reducing the medications under Dr. Chen's supervision. Building my strength with physical therapy. Learning to walk without the shuffle that years of muscle relaxants had caused. I'd even bought a dress, the first real dress I'd owned in decades, a deep emerald green that brought out the color in my eyes that had been dulled by drugs for so long. The night of the gala, my mother left the house at 6, resplendent in a designer gown I now knew had been paid for with my money. I'll have Nurse Patricia stay with you, she said, referring to the private nurse she sometimes hired to watch me when she was gone. Another expense charged to my trust, of course. Actually, I'm feeling much better, I said. I think I'll just sleep. She frowned, suspicious. Better? How? Just, clearer. Must be the new medication adjustment. Her face relaxed. Of course. She'd increased my doses recently, thinking she was sedating me further. She didn't know I hadn't taken a single pill she'd given me in weeks. Good. Rest well, sweetheart. I'll tell everyone you send your love. The moment she left, I sprang into action. Shower, hair, makeup, things I hadn't done properly in years. The dress fit perfectly. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked like the woman I should have been, could have been, if not for her. The Uber driver did a double take when I got in the car. Union League? Fancy event tonight? The fanciest, I said. It's going to be unforgettable. The Union League was glowing with warm light, valets helping guests from their cars, everyone in their finest attire. I walked in through the main entrance, my invitation, forged by Harold's assistant, getting me past security without question. The ballroom was magnificent, crystal chandeliers, gold leaf molding, circular tables set with fine china. And at the front, a stage where my mother would soon stand to accept her award. I kept to the shadows at first, watching. There she was, holding court at a table near the stage, surrounded by admirers. Dr. James Patterson, the chief of staff at Jefferson Hospital. Margaret Chin Williams, the pharmaceutical heiress. Judge Robert Thornton and his wife. All of them hanging on her every word. Eleanor is simply extraordinary, I heard Margaret say. The way she's balanced her career with caring for her poor daughter all these years. It's inspirational. How is Devon? Dr. Patterson asked. Any improvement? My mother's face took on that practiced expression of noble suffering. Some days are better than others. Tonight is particularly hard, she so wanted to be here, but the stimulation would have triggered a severe episode. She sends her love to everyone, though. She's so proud of the work we do here. I almost laughed. Almost. The program began at 8. Speeches about the importance of supporting families in crisis. A video presentation showing my mother at various charity events, visiting sick children in hospitals, always the picture of compassion. Then, finally, the moment arrived. And now, the MC announced, it is my great privilege to present this year's Lifetime Achievement Award to a woman who has dedicated her life to helping others while facing her own personal challenges with grace and strength. Please welcome Dr. Eleanor Marsh. The applause was thunderous. My mother rose, waving graciously, and made her way to the stage. She was radiant, triumphant. This was her moment, the pinnacle of her elaborate deception. She began her speech, talking about the importance of compassion, the challenges of caring for a chronically ill child, the sacrifices required. The audience was captivated, some wiping away tears. My daughter Devon, she said, her voice catching with practiced emotion, has taught me more about strength and resilience than any textbook ever could. Though she couldn't be here tonight. Actually, Mother, I'm right here. Every head in the room turned as I stepped into the light. The gasp that went through the crowd was audible. My mother's face went white, then red, then white again. Devon? Her voice cracked. You're supposed to be sick? Sedated? Dying? I walked down the center aisle, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Yes, that was always the plan, wasn't it? Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the room, pulling out my phone and connecting it to the AV system. Harold's tech-savvy assistant had arranged that earlier. I have something you need to see. On the large screens that had moments before shown my mother's charity work, new footage began to play. The hidden camera videos. My mother grinding up unmarked pills and mixing them into my food. Her voice, captured clearly, saying, this should keep her manageable for the next few days. The room erupted. People standing, shouting, some trying to leave. But I wasn't done. For 21 years, I said, my voice carrying over the chaos, this woman has been poisoning me. Drugging me. Keeping me sick for sympathy and money. She's stolen $3.2 million from the inheritance my grandmother left me. She's collected disability payments in my name. She's built her entire reputation on the fiction of being a devoted mother to a sick child, a child she was making sick. This is ridiculous, my mother shouted from the stage. Devon is clearly having a psychotic episode. This is part of her condition. Is it? I held up a folder. Because I have medical tests from an independent doctor showing 6 different medications in my system that you were secretly administering. I have your own notes detailing your drugging schedule. I have bank records showing every dollar you stole. The FBI agents entered then, their badges visible, their purpose clear. The room fell silent. Dr. Eleanor Marsh, the lead agent said, walking toward the stage, you're under arrest for fraud, theft, assault, and false imprisonment. As they read her rights, my mother's mask finally slipped completely. The composed, compassionate doctor disappeared, replaced by something feral and desperate. You ungrateful bitch, she screamed at me as they cuffed her. I gave you everything. I gave up my life for you. You were nothing without me. Nothing. No, Mother, I said quietly, but my words carried in the silent room. I was nothing with you. Without you, I'm free. They led her out as the room watched in stunned silence. Then Margaret Chin Williams stood up and started clapping. One person, then another, then the entire room was on their feet, applauding not for the woman who'd just been arrested, but for the daughter who'd survived her. But I wasn't done. Not quite. There's more, I announced, and the room settled again. My mother didn't act entirely alone. There were doctors who ignored obvious signs. Hospitals that didn't question why my symptoms only occurred at home. Colleagues who chose to believe the fiction because it was easier than confronting the truth. I looked directly at Dr. Patterson. You, doctor, dismissed my grandmother's concerns 5 years ago when she came to you. You said a mother would never harm her child. You were wrong. He had the grace to look ashamed. I'm not looking for revenge against everyone, I continued. but I am demanding accountability. Every doctor who treated me will be investigated. Every falsified medical record will be reviewed. And this foundation, built on lies and funded partly with stolen money, will be dissolved. The remaining funds will go to actual victims of medical abuse. The rest of the evening was a blur. Harold appeared at my side, guiding me through the crowd of reporters who'd somehow already arrived. Dr. Chen was there too, checking on me, making sure the stress wasn't too much. But I felt stronger than I had in decades. Each word of truth I'd spoken had lifted a weight from my shoulders. Each revelation had broken another bar of my prison. The next morning, my mother's arrest was front-page news. Respected psychiatrist arrested for decades of medical abuse, read the Philadelphia Inquirer headline. The story had everything: wealth, betrayal, and a twist worthy of a thriller novel. I spent the day at the FBI field office, providing testimony that would be used in the criminal case. Agent Sarah Martinez, who led the investigation, was thorough but kind. In my 20 years with the Bureau, she told me, I've never seen a case quite like this. The level of documentation your mother kept, it's like she was proud of what she was doing. She was, I said. In her mind, she was the perfect mother, sacrificing everything for her sick child. The fact that she was causing the sickness was just logistics. The financial crimes were staggering when fully uncovered. Beyond the $3.2 million trust fund, my mother had collected $847,000 in disability payments under my name. Claimed $1.2 million in medical expenses that were never incurred. Taken out 3 life insurance policies on me, totaling $5 million. Forged my signature on loan documents totaling $380,000. She was planning to kill you, Agent Martinez said bluntly. The insurance policies, the increasing medication doses, we found searches on her computer for accidental overdose and undetectable poisons. The revelation should have shocked me, but it didn't. It was the logical endpoint of her twisted narrative. A dead daughter would have been the ultimate sympathy card, the final chapter in her story of maternal sacrifice. But she'd gotten greedy. She'd wanted the money and the ongoing attention. So she'd kept me alive, barely, walking the tightrope between sick enough to control and well enough to survive. The medical investigation was equally damning. Dr. Chen worked with a team of specialists to document the long-term damage from years of unnecessary medication. Kidney damage from prolonged use of certain antibiotics. Liver dysfunction from the cocktail of medications. Cognitive impairment from years of antipsychotics and sedatives. Severe muscle atrophy from forced inactivity. Malnutrition from medications that suppressed appetite and caused nausea. The good news, Dr. Chen told me, is that much of this is reversible with time and proper treatment. You're only 54. Your body is remarkably resilient, considering what it's been through. The psychological evaluation was harder. Dr. Michael Foster, a trauma specialist, worked with me to understand the depth of the abuse. Survivors often suffer from betrayal trauma and PTSD, he explained during our first session. In your case, the betrayal is particularly profound because it came from the person who should have been your primary protector. We talked about the concept of learned helplessness, how years of being told I was sick and unable to function had become my reality, even when the physical causes were removed. Your mother didn't just poison your body, Dr. Foster said. She poisoned your sense of self. Recovery isn't just about getting off the medications, it's about reclaiming your identity. The legal team Harold had assembled was working on both the criminal and civil cases. The criminal charges were extensive. Aggravated assault, multiple counts. Fraud, multiple counts. Identity theft. False imprisonment. Attempted murder, based on the insurance policies and search history. Practicing medicine without proper authorization, she'd been prescribing medications outside her scope as a psychiatrist. The civil case focused on recovering the stolen funds and seeking damages for the years of abuse. The number they came up with was staggering: $15 million in compensatory damages, plus punitive damages to be determined at trial. She doesn't have that kind of money, Harold explained. But she does have malpractice insurance, personal assets, and her practice. We'll recover what we can. More importantly, the case was setting precedent. Because Munchausen by proxy is severely under-recognized, the publicity around my case was bringing attention to a form of abuse that often goes undetected. I started receiving messages from other survivors. A woman in Texas whose mother had kept her sick for 18 years. A man in California who'd lost his teenage years to his father's need for attention. A teenager in Florida who was currently trapped in a similar situation and didn't know how to escape. For the Florida teenager, I was able to connect them with local authorities who initiated an investigation. Within a week, they were removed from their home and their parent was under investigation. They sent me a message, "You saved my life. Thank you for being brave enough to speak out." The medical community was also responding. The American Psychiatric Association issued a statement about the importance of recognizing and reporting suspected medical child abuse. Hospitals began reviewing their protocols for identifying cases where symptoms only appeared in the presence of a particular caregiver. But not everyone was supportive. My mother had her defenders, colleagues who couldn't believe brilliant, compassionate Eleanor could do such things. Some suggested I was the one with mental illness, that I was delusional, seeking attention or money. One particularly nasty editorial in a medical journal suggested that I was suffering from false memory syndrome and that my mother was the real victim. The author, Dr. Richard Blackwood, was later discovered to be one of my mother's former lovers who'd benefited financially from their relationship. His medical license was under review by the time the full truth came out. The criminal trial began in September 2025, 5 months after my mother's arrest. She'd been held without bail after the judge determined she was a flight risk and a danger to others. They'd discovered she'd been in contact with someone claiming to be a private investigator who was actually a hitman. Even from jail, she was trying to silence me. The courthouse was packed every day. Media from around the world covered the story. It had everything: wealth, betrayal, medical mystery, and a villain who looked like everyone's favorite grandmother. My mother entered the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, her usually perfect hair now gray at the roots, her face gaunt. But her eyes still held that calculating gleam I knew so well. She pleaded not guilty to all charges, her defense team arguing that she was mentally ill herself, suffering from a severe personality disorder that made her unable to distinguish right from wrong. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney James Rodriguez, methodically laid out the case. The videos were played. The medical records were examined. The financial documents were scrutinized. I testified for 3 days. It was exhausting, reliving decades of abuse in minute detail. My mother's attorney, a shark named Victoria Clemens, tried to tear me apart on cross-examination. "Isn't it true that you were actually sick as a child?" she asked. I had normal childhood illnesses, which my mother exaggerated and extended with unnecessary medications. "But you can't prove that, can you? You're not a doctor." "No, but Dr. Chen can prove it. And Dr. Foster. And the 6 other medical experts who've examined the evidence. You stand to gain millions from this case, don't you?" "I stand to regain the millions that were already mine, that were stolen from me." She tried every angle, suggesting I was coached, that I was delusional, that I was seeking revenge for imagined slights. But the evidence was overwhelming. The most damaging testimony came from an unexpected source, Nurse Patricia, the woman my mother had hired to watch me. She took the stand on day 5. "I started suspecting something was wrong about 3 years ago," she testified. "Devon would be almost normal when Dr. Marsh wasn't around, then suddenly deteriorate when she returned. I saw Dr. Marsh adding something to Devon's food once, something that wasn't prescribed." "Why didn't you report it?" the prosecutor asked. "I tried. I went to the medical board. But Dr. Marsh was so well respected, and I was just a nurse. They said I must be mistaken. Dr. Marsh fired me the next week, but she hired me back a month later. I think she wanted to keep me close, make sure I didn't talk." But the moment that sealed my mother's fate came when the prosecution presented her journals. Not the medical notes I'd found, but personal journals discovered in a storage unit she'd rented under a false name. The entries were chilling. "Devon was too independent today. Increased the benzos. Much better, properly dependent again. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if I just gave her a little too much. The insurance would set me free. But then I'd lose my purpose. What would people think of me without my sick daughter to care for? That bitch Patricia knows. I can see it in her eyes. If she tries to interfere, I'll have to discredit her. Maybe suggest early onset dementia. Who would believe a crazy old woman over a respected psychiatrist? My grandmother had been right all along. And my mother had considered killing her too. When my mother took the stand in her own defense, it was a masterclass in manipulation. She cried on cue, painted herself as a devoted mother overwhelmed by the stress of caring for a sick child. She claimed the journals were fiction, a way of dealing with her stress. She insisted that every medication she'd given me was necessary, that I was delusional, that this was all an elaborate scheme to steal her money. I gave up everything for Devon, she sobbed. My personal life, my happiness, my health. And this is how she repays me? With lies and accusations? But under cross-examination, her story fell apart. She couldn't explain the unmarked medications. She couldn't justify the hidden bank accounts. She couldn't account for the missing trust fund money. You claim you were caring for Devon out of love, Rodriguez said. But isn't it true that you were collecting disability payments in her name? That money was for her care. Money that went directly into your personal account? I had to manage it for her. Because she was too sick to manage it herself? Too sick because of the medications you were secretly giving her? That's not. Dr. Marsh, did you or did you not add crushed Valium to your daughter's food on April 14, 2025? The courtroom was silent. My mother's jaw clenched. I plead the fifth. But it was too late. The damage was done. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. As the verdict was read, my mother's composure finally shattered completely. She screamed obscenities, had to be physically restrained, and was dragged from the courtroom still shouting that I was ungrateful, that I destroyed her, that she should have killed me when she had the chance. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. 25 to life, with no possibility of parole for 15 years. She would die in prison, and we both knew it. As they led her away, she turned to look at me one last time. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something that might have been regret in her eyes. Or maybe it was just rage at being caught. I'll never know, and I don't care. With the criminal trial over, the civil case proceeded quickly. My mother's assets were frozen, her practice dissolved, her medical license permanently revoked. The house on Delancey Street, my prison for so many years, was awarded to me as part of the settlement. I sold it immediately. I couldn't live with those ghosts. The trust fund was fully restored to my control, plus interest and penalties. The total came to $4.7 million. Additionally, the insurance companies that had paid out on fraudulent medical claims sued my mother's malpractice insurance, resulting in an additional $3 million settlement to me. Harold helped me set up a proper trust structure to protect and manage the assets. By placing assets into a trust, you can safeguard them from creditors, lawsuits, and even certain tax liabilities. This protection ensures that your intended beneficiaries receive their inheritance intact. But money was just numbers. The real recovery was physical and psychological. Dr. Chen supervised a careful withdrawal from the cocktail of medications. It took months, with setbacks and breakthroughs. Some days I felt like I was dying. Others, I felt reborn. Your body is essentially going through withdrawal from multiple substances simultaneously, she explained. It's going to be hell, but there's life on the other side. Physical therapy helped rebuild my atrophied muscles. Occupational therapy taught me basic life skills I'd never learned: how to manage finances, how to shop for groceries, how to exist as an independent adult. The psychological work was harder. Trauma-focused psychotherapies such as cognitive processing therapy helped me process not just the abuse, but the lost decades. I grieved for the person I could have been, the life I should have lived. You can't get those years back, Dr. Foster told me. But you can make the next years count double. I started writing, first in a journal, then a blog, then a book. Poisoned Love, a daughter's story of Munchausen by proxy, was published a year after the trial. It became a bestseller, not because of sensationalism, but because it gave voice to a hidden form of abuse. Because of low public awareness of Munchausen by proxy, it can be difficult for survivors to explain to friends and loved ones what they've been through. My book helped change that. I received thousands of messages from survivors, from family members who suddenly understood what had happened to their loved ones, from medical professionals who realized they'd missed signs in their own practices. One message stood out. It was from a nurse in Ohio. 30 years ago, I treated a little girl whose mother insisted she had a rare blood disorder. Something felt wrong, but I was young and didn't trust my instincts. That girl died at age 12 from complications. Your story made me realize she was likely murdered. I've reported it to authorities. It's too late for justice, but maybe her story can prevent future tragedies. Thank you for your courage. I established the Patricia Marsh Foundation with part of my settlement money. Named for my grandmother, who saw the truth but couldn't prove it, the foundation provides legal and medical support for victims of medical child abuse. We also fund training for medical professionals to recognize the signs. In our first year, we helped identify and rescue 17 children from abusive situations. Each rescue felt like a small redemption for my own lost childhood. I also began speaking at medical conferences, sharing my story with the people who most needed to hear it. The reactions were always mixed. Some doctors were defensive, insisting they would never miss such obvious signs. Others were horrified at how easily they could be manipulated by a determined abuser. The hardest part, I would tell them, is that the abusers often seem like the most devoted, caring parents. They're at every appointment, they know every medical term, they advocate fiercely for their child's care. But look closer. Does the child improve when away from the caregiver? Are the symptoms consistent with any known condition? Trust your instincts. The foundation also worked on legislation. Devon's law was passed in Pennsylvania in 2026, requiring hospitals to flag cases where children presented with unexplained symptoms that only occurred in the presence of one caregiver. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. My mother, meanwhile, was not adjusting well to prison. I received updates from the prosecutor's office. She'd been placed in solitary after attacking another inmate who wouldn't give her their medication. She'd been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder with antisocial features. She refused all treatment, insisting she was the victim of a conspiracy. She wrote me letters, dozens of them. I never opened them. Harold kept them in a file in case they were needed for legal purposes, but I had no interest in reading her words. She'd had 21 years to speak to me. I'd heard enough. One day, about 18 months after her conviction, I received a call from the prison. My mother had attempted suicide, pills she'd somehow hoarded. She survived but suffered permanent liver damage. She was transferred to the medical wing, where she would spend the rest of her days. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, just emptiness. She was a chapter of my life that was closed, a cancer that had been excised. Whether she lived or died no longer affected me. 2 years have passed since that night at the Union League when I reclaimed my life. I'm 56 now, and while I can't get back the decades that were stolen, I'm making the most of every day I have left. The physical recovery has been remarkable. The kidney and liver damage have largely healed. I've gained healthy weight, built muscle, and can now run 3 miles without stopping, something that would have been unimaginable during my years of forced illness. My hair has grown back thick and healthy, the gray strands a badge of survival rather than premature aging. I bought a condo in Rittenhouse Square, not far from where my mother had her practice. Some might find that morbid, but for me, it's a daily reminder that I survived. The building has floor-to-ceiling windows that flood every room with light, the opposite of the dark, medicine-scented prison of my childhood. I've also discovered life at 56. First job, part-time at the foundation, first real friendship, Sarah, another survivor who understands without explanation, first romantic relationship, Thomas, a widower I met at a book signing who makes me laugh and never treats me as fragile. You're the strongest person I know, Thomas told me on our 1-year anniversary. Not because of what you survived, but because of how you chose to live afterward. The foundation has grown beyond my wildest dreams. We now operate in 12 states, with a team of lawyers, doctors, and counselors. We've helped rescue 43 children and several adults from medical abuse. Each case breaks my heart and gives me purpose. One case particularly touched me. A 7-year-old boy named Marcus whose father had been making him sick for 3 years. The similarities to my case were eerie, the respected professional parent, the mysterious illness, the isolation. But unlike my case, we caught it early. Marcus is now 10, healthy, and living with his mother. He sends me drawings sometimes, pictures of superheroes saving kids from monsters. I frame every one. The book led to a documentary, which led to a Netflix series loosely based on my story. Watching actors portray the worst moments of my life was surreal, but if it helped even one person recognize abuse, it was worth it. I've also reconnected with people from my past. Emma, my childhood friend whose house was the only place I ever felt well, reached out after seeing the news coverage. I always knew something was wrong, she told me over coffee. My mom wanted to call child services, but your mother was so convincing. I'm so sorry we didn't do more. You were children, I reminded her. and she fooled everyone. We've rebuilt our friendship, making up for lost time. She has 3 kids and a messy, beautiful life that I love being part of. Her youngest calls me Aunt Devon and doesn't know or care about my past. To her, I'm just the cool aunt who brings the best presents and always has time to listen. I've also found unexpected allies in the medical community. Dr. Patterson, who had dismissed my grandmother's concerns, became one of the foundation's biggest supporters after the trial. He personally funded an entire training program for residents on recognizing medical child abuse. I failed you, he told me at a foundation event. I let my respect for your mother blind me to the evidence. I can't undo that, but I can make sure it doesn't happen again. The money from the settlement and book has given me freedom I never imagined. Not just financial freedom, but the freedom to choose. I travel now, Paris last spring, Tokyo in the fall. Each trip is a celebration of autonomy, of being able to go where I want, when I want, without asking permission or fearing punishment. But the greatest freedom is the mundane one, waking up each morning without drugs in my system, eating breakfast without fear, going through an entire day without manufactured symptoms. The simple act of feeling well is a miracle I never take for granted. I still have bad days. PTSD doesn't simply disappear. Sometimes I wake up in a panic, convinced I'm back in that house, that the last 2 years were a dream. Sometimes I see a woman who looks like my mother and have to remind myself to breathe. Sometimes I wonder who I would have been if those 21 years hadn't been stolen. But Dr. Foster has helped me reframe it. You're not defined by what was done to you, but by what you chose to do next. What I chose was to transform poison into medicine, to turn my trauma into someone else's lifeline. The last time I saw my mother was at a legal proceeding regarding the final dispersal of her remaining assets. She was in a wheelchair, her liver failing, her body finally experiencing the kind of genuine illness she'd fabricated for me for so long. She tried to speak to me, reaching out with a yellowed hand. "Devon, please." I walked past without acknowledgement. I had nothing to say to her, no forgiveness to offer, no closure to seek. She was a stranger who had once held my life hostage. Nothing more. But I did stop at the door and turn back, not to her, but to her lawyer. "Make sure she has adequate medical care," I said. Real medical care, not what she gave me. I'm not her, and I won't become her. It was the last grace I would ever extend in her direction. September 15, 2030. Today marks 5 years since the trial ended. I'm 61 now, and life has a rhythm I never thought possible. The foundation has helped over 200 families. Devon's Law has been adopted in 23 states. The book has been translated into 15 languages. My mother died 2 years ago in prison. The warden called to inform me personally. She'd refused treatment for her liver failure, perhaps the only honest medical decision she'd ever made. She died alone, which seemed fitting. I didn't attend the funeral. There was no one else there either. I felt relief when I heard. Not joy, I'm not capable of taking pleasure in anyone's death, but relief that the last tie to that life was severed. The boogeyman was truly gone. Thomas and I married last year in a small ceremony in the garden at Pennsylvania Hospital, the place where my grandmother had tried to get help for me all those years ago. It felt like coming full circle, reclaiming a space that had been part of my imprisonment and making it part of my freedom. Sarah was my maid of honor. Marcus, now 15 and thriving, was our ring bearer. The reception was filled with survivors, advocates, and the medical professionals who had helped save me. It was a celebration not just of love, but of survival, of the family we choose rather than the one we're born into. Dr. Chen, who had first documented my real condition, gave a toast that left everyone in tears. Devon's story reminds us that healing isn't about forgetting the past, it's about refusing to let it define your future. She took 21 years of poison and turned it into medicine for hundreds of others. That's not just survival. That's alchemy. I still live in Philadelphia, in the same light-filled condo. But now it's filled with life, Thomas's laughter, friends for dinner, foundation meetings that run late into the night. The walls are covered with pictures, Marcus's superhero drawings, photos from our travels, images of children who are alive and healthy because we caught their abusers in time. I've started painting, something I was never allowed to do as a child, too messy, too stimulating. I'm terrible at it, but I love the freedom of creating something that doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to serve a purpose beyond bringing me joy. The nightmares have mostly faded, though certain triggers remain. The smell of liquid medication. The sound of pills rattling in a bottle. The particular tone of false concern. But these are manageable echoes, not the overwhelming symphony they once were. I think about my grandmother often. I had her body moved to a cemetery near my home, with a new headstone that reads, Patricia Marsh. She saw the truth. I bring her flowers every Sunday and tell her about the lives saved in her name. Sometimes young survivors ask me if it gets easier, if the anger ever fully goes away, if they'll ever feel normal. I tell them the truth. Easier? Yes. The anger fades but leaves a residue, like smoke stains on glass. You can clean it, but if you look closely, you can still see where the fire was. Normal? There's no such thing. But you'll find your own version of it, and it will be enough. More than enough. It will be yours. The money is mostly gone now, spent on the foundation, on helping others escape their own prisons. I keep enough to live comfortably, to travel, to never be dependent on anyone again. But hoarding it would be letting my mother win, letting her theft define how I relate to wealth. Instead, I've chosen to see it as seed money for a garden of recovery, each dollar planted in soil that will grow something she never could, genuine healing, real love, authentic care. Last week, I received a letter from a woman in Germany whose daughter had been saved because a doctor there had read my book and recognized the signs. Inside was a photo of a healthy, smiling 10-year-old girl. Her name is Devon, the letter said. We named her after the woman who saved her life before it could be stolen. I framed that photo and hung it where I can see it every morning. It reminds me that our stories don't end with our trauma. They begin with what we choose to do next. My mother wanted me to be nothing without her. She nearly succeeded. For 21 years, I was a ghost haunting my own life, a character in her twisted narrative. But ghosts, I've learned, can become solid again. They can speak. They can act. They can save others from joining their ranks. I am Devon Marsh. I am a survivor, an advocate, a wife, a friend. I am 61 years old and just beginning to live. My mother stole my past, but my future is mine alone. And that, more than any revenge, is the ultimate victory. The story you've just heard is fiction, but the reality it's based on is all too real. Factitious disorder imposed on another affects countless families, with victims suffering in silence because the abuse is so hard to detect and prove. If any part of Devon's story resonated with you, if you recognize patterns in your own life or the life of someone you love, please seek help. The National Child Abuse Hotline, 1-800-4A-CHILD, is available 24/7. Adult survivors can find resources through the Munchausen support website. Remember, friends and family members who recognize and affirm a survivor's experience are extremely important. Sometimes, being believed is the first step toward freedom. Devon's story reminds us that it's never too late to reclaim your life. Whether you're 24 or 54, whether the abuse lasted 2 years or 20, you deserve freedom, health, and happiness. The woman who inspired this story wants you to know, you are not crazy. You are not ungrateful. You are not alone. And you are stronger than you know. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, please share it. You never know who might need to hear it. And remember, the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt us. It's building a life so beautiful that their absence is the greatest gift they ever gave us. This has been The Guardian's Betrayal. May all your guardians be worthy of your trust.